I think our society really needs to think about our children, and if we are going to be providing even health services to our kids, then we need to invest in education, and that's why I'm here. Let me just spread the word, but that message needs to go out. Education is a central part of our society, and if we want our society to succeed, then the basic needs of our students need to be met, because how are we supposed to then move up and expect these rigorous academic challenges and produce critical thinkers for the next generation if they can't even be fed?
On March 13th, 2020, Solano County announced the closure of all schools due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I wanted to get in touch with some educators to talk about the impacts of being forced to switch to remote learning, so I reached out to some staff from my high school, MIT Academy, the 6th to 12th grade charter school, as well as its recently opened sister school, Griffin Academy, which plans to open up its high school next year.
So my name is Japzon. I'm a third-year college student at SF State. I currently work at MIT as a professional tutor.
Well, my name is Kahmarii. I am the main tutor at Griffin Academy. So I am the one and only tutor, specifically in math, but I do all subjects.
So I'm a teacher at MIT. I'm also a club advisor, and I teach social science. And right now we're in quarantine, so that my role has changed, but I'm still a classroom instructor.
Well, I'm Stephany Vallejo. I'm a teacher at Griffin Academy. I teach 6th and 7th grade social studies, and a graduate student, I guess, because I just finished that too.
My name is Jessica Morrison. I am a 9th and 10th grade social studies teacher, and I teach at MIT Academy of Griffin Technology Academies in Vallejo, California.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steph Morgado. I'm the director of Griffin Academy Middle School and soon to be high school, which opens up next year. While I was at MIT Academy, I was an avid physics and chemistry teacher about 10 years before I transitioned to my current role in administration.
With many students coming from low socioeconomic backgrounds, I wanted to discuss the challenges in equity in learning that have been brought to light due to the pandemic.
So I've tried to keep a lot of the things the same, but obviously that's not really possible with the limitations. It's changed how I interact with them, obviously, because I can't see them and I can't see if they're struggling, so I rely on them to tell me if they're struggling. That's been the hardest thing, I think, instructionally, is being able to see people and talk to them. And then if they're not there, there's nothing I can do. And if they are there, I still can't do much because they're a box on the screen.
I can't interact with students the same way I used to. I think one of the biggest problems with students now is when I try to tutor them, they either don't respond or they don't listen, and they also cheat. Another challenge is that students have also seen used this as an opportunity to not come to class, or they come to class and they just don't pay attention.
For me personally as a teacher, the connection that I develop and the relationship I develop with students is one of my most kind of important parts of teaching.
It feels like I am starting from scratch. Like in the beginning, kids don't really open up to you if they don't know you long enough. And I feel like right before this pandemic started, we had got a really cool bond where it was easy to jump into subjects.
Given the students that we have at MIT, many of them have some academic struggles. And if I'm not there, or their teachers aren't right there with them, I think it's much more challenging for them to grasp and work with material.
The students who don't show up are the ones who need to show up the most. But there's so many unknown challenges. And so it's been a real struggle because those are the kids that definitely need to show up the most and are the most vulnerable.
So I already started creating a plan beforehand. And so I was able to meet with the teachers Friday during their lunch and kind of review the plan just in case it happened. And it did happen. So actually that same Monday, we were able to transition fully to a virtual school. The flip side of that is then finding the support and resources for the wide range of students that we have. How do we communicate with families effectively? How do we communicate this online academic plan without, I couldn't have an assembly with them and meet with them.
The uncertainty of the whole situation has had an impact on both students and teachers' mental health and their need for support.
Their social emotional health right now is not good for everybody. Some people might be okay, but the majority of people are facing at least a tiny bit of stress.
And I try to be, for me at least, I was trying to be as sympathetic as possible because I'm first generation. I was the oldest. So I knew that if I was in this pandemic in their age group, I would be the one behind all my siblings, like, hey, did you do your homework? Hey, did you eat? Hey, did you do all of this stuff? And I know a lot of the kids are same place, like they're the oldest sibling, or they're the, the ones that are being responsible.
What it really forces us to think about, what are the supports that we need to put in place that just deal with life and support. So we had to rethink how we provide our counseling services. Something that I had learned is that a lot of our students and some of our staff, they're grieving, whether it's not like an actual death, they're grieving the loss of their social life. I've tried to host lunch sessions for students to still try to socialize on Google Hangout.
They've definitely had to repurpose a lot of people's kind of job descriptions. Student services has gone from, dealing with on-campus conflicts and has become kind of one of our major, this isn't quite the right word, but attendance. They've done a lot of reaching out to students, kids that we have not seen since March. There are students I've not heard from since mid-March, and they're doing their best to reach out to those kids.
The biggest issue right now is how do we reach out to like ESL right now, because I guess no one's really like catering to those students. So my biggest fear is that we're like this for a while, but we're only getting the students that have the access and resources. We're just missing like a huge gap of students that can't communicate with us.
At Griffin, we have one-to-one mentoring, and so just building in time. So the online schedule is different from our Bell schedule, and it's building in time to do that mentoring. Those check-ins are more important now more than ever, because every week something different happens, and so it's having that time, the intentionality of making sure, okay, well, is your family safe? Are you feeling any sort of anxiety? Just checking with them to see if there are any sort of resources that we need to connect our mentees with.
With the teachers, as coworkers, I think it's been harder to kind of get on the same page about what we're doing. And I think with admin, they're not understanding the struggles that we're going through. They're just trying to manage and see how can they reach these kids, but they're not really seeing the background of all the work that we're doing. And I think one of the biggest stressors was when we were moving over. We have mentors. Our principal was expecting us to meet with their kids every single week. And I'm just like, I understand we have to be there for the kids and we have to be there in the support, but I'm not going to force these kids to talk to me if they don't want to. I feel like that's just an added stress to them. And it's an added stress to me because I'm also, as a human being, going through a pandemic. None of the admin have ever checked in with me as a teacher to say like, hey, how are you doing through all of this? Is there anything that we can do to support you? Like, the only support that we've been offered is like, oh, what classroom supports do you need? But not like, how are you mentally supported right now during this pandemic? We're not trained therapists. We're not trained as psychologists. That's part of our role. But if we're going to be doing that, we need also support from higher up to make sure that we are in a mentally safe space.
With all these things in mind, these teachers talk about what they think school and education is going to look like in the future.
Well, I know one of the big concerns in education is equity, and I know that's a huge factor. So that's something that you can't neglect to talk about, is that this is going to increase inequities because different people have different resources. Going to school is more of an equalizer than staying home. So there are advantages to staying home, a lot of them, and it's nice to be at your home, but at the same time, this is gonna exacerbate some maybe achievement gaps and things like that.
It's just a sad place in America that our schools have become this vehicle to feed children instead of thinking about what are the policies and systemic issues that exist in society that don't allow students to be fed on a regular basis. What is it about our food stamp program that isn't giving students food at home? Where is this disconnect versus now schools becoming a vehicle to provide all of these social services, but yet we're not getting the funding to do that well?
There are kids who are not getting the quality of education they would normally get in the classroom. They're going to have an interruption in their education. And next year we're going to have to compensate for that.
A lot of students aren't going to be passing high school or whatever grade level they're in right now. A lot of students that were 4.0 students or A students have kind of dipped and tanked. So now that's kind of a big issue now, is how do we deal with students that haven't had that transition of being in class, pick back up where they were at and being an A student and stuff like that.
The other issue is with the fact that there's a very good chance that we will at least start next year online. That start of the year, how do we start our classroom? when I'm not physically in the room with them and can't physically talk to them and can't physically see them.
My fear is that we're going to lose the connection that we had built, because even just walking around the hallway, I get to talk to the students and see that, and so I don't see them in the same capacity. I think that's also led to a bigger divide even between me and the staff and teachers, because I'm trying to put out all of these fires, and that's my biggest fear, that I'm losing those relationships.
I think my biggest fear is the equity portion of it, where our kids of color, our students of color, are already left behind. The money that we're getting into our school, we're getting a 20 to 10% budget cut this year. And so that's not going to help. And it just makes that, they always talk about the achievement gap, but it's an opportunity gap, because our kids do not have the same opportunities as other well-off kids. And I think that's the biggest one where we're going to see, where I know the struggles that these kids go through. Parents working 2 jobs, parents not at home. They have to be the responsible ones. They have to be the ones taking care of their older, younger siblings. That is a struggle in itself. And if we don't have support systems to help those kids there in their home while we're doing this digital learning, nothing is going to change.
Public schools in California are already working on the bare minimum of funding most of the time. And the idea that we're getting even more cuts is terrifying. I don't know if that's going to end up affecting what curriculum or what extracurriculars or what clubs those kids have access to. Because one thing that we know for sure is kids that only do core curriculum do not thrive without extracurriculars. They need those. Those are choice options in their life. And teenagers rarely really get choice options, especially because MIT is still attending, or GTA is still intending to open another high school, open a 4th school next year. So how we're supposed to open a 4th school when we're already pressed down to bare bones and we're expecting a 10% budget cut? Yeah, we're really worried about next year.
There's going to be some good things that come out of it. So a lot of us will be much more tech savvy, which is good, and teaches us, and it's good to have problem solving. It's good to face something new, challenges. So from a teaching standpoint, I think it'll be a benefit to everyone. I think it'll improve our skills, and it'll show us different ways of interacting and intervening on like communication versus classroom management.
Getting my students engaged in even just school community is really important. And I've seen a huge upswing in the number of students attending PTSA meetings, committee meetings, board meetings, setting up their own meetings, setting up grade level meetings, because they want to have a say and they want to hear what's going on and they want to hear what's planned.
All these issues get brought up to admin or people in education that make the decisions to start realizing what we need to fix, like giving more resources, or like really planning out emergency plans like this, are really like investing into education.
The other thing I think that's kind of been good from all of this is that it's really forced us to look at all our systems and structures in schools and really think about what's not working. Because if it's not working in a virtual way and it's terrible, then more than likely it probably wasn't working. And now this digital world is forcing us to really look at the services that we're providing. It's not working right now. We really need to think about not only how to make it work in a virtual world, but when we come back, what's that going to be? And one of my fears is when we transition back, what does that even mean? I think there's a lot of rhetoric and things out there, and this is really bringing the issues of equity and social justice at the forefront, because we're really seeing a big gap in what schools are required to provide. The funding formula in California has changed to provide some more funds, but that doesn't make up for the funds that other higher SCS schools have just from family donations and all those other things that you don't really get to capture. And I think our society really needs to think about our children, and if we are going to be providing even health services to our kids, then we need to invest in education. And that's why I'm here. Let me just spread the word, but that message needs to go out. Education is a central part of our society, and if we want our society to succeed, then the basic needs of our students need to be met, because how are we supposed to then move up and expect these rigorous academic challenges and produce critical thinkers for the next generation if they can't even be fed?